You guys are going to love this episode where I interview Lissette about all things brand partnerships. Lissette has a really interesting career in that she started off working in marketing. So she worked at an advertising agency where her job was to hire influencers for marketing campaigns. Then she became an influencer herself, and now she actually owns an entire influencer management agency called Influence with Impact. This is a super valuable episode. You guys are going to learn a ton from Lissette today. I actually signed with her agency in August of 2024, and it has been absolutely great so far. I previously worked with a few other agencies before this, and Influence with Impact has been my favorite. I used to think that signing with an agency really meant that like I made it as an influencer. But what I found through working with a few different agencies at this point is that you have to have made it first, or else signing with an agency will be pointless, right? They are not going to totally change your Instagram page. They're not working on your content at all. They're not going to like have magic connections that make it super easy for you to get brand partnerships. What they're basically doing is negotiating on your behalf with brands that are already reaching out to you or brands that you as a creator are actively pitching. And then they coordinate all the details, right? They coordinate the contract, the due dates, they negotiate the payment, they coordinate feedback with the brand, they invoice, chase down the payment, all of that. And in exchange, they keep 20% of the brand deals that they coordinate. Now, I've definitely had a ton of experience with brands prior to signing with Influence with Impact, which is why I think that it's been such a successful partnership so far. So I started my Instagram page in October 2020 and earned no money from brand partnerships that first year. In 2021, I basically earned nothing from brand partnerships. It was a total of $385. And then in 2022, things really started to pick up for me. So I made $37,000 from brand deals in 2022. In 2023, I was just shy of six figures at $92,000. And last year in 2024, I had $117,000 in brand partnerships. And what's also pretty wild is that I'm recording this on February 21st. And as of today, I have $140,000 of brand partnerships under contract for 2025 already, which is just so wild. So I share all these numbers because Lissette and I did not get super specific in the episode. And I know that this is really helpful to be tangible because what you're going to hear in this episode is that brand deals are not necessarily easy to get, right? You do need to develop skills as a creator. You do need to figure out where you stand out, where your expertise is, how you can build like a strong relationship with your community. But it is so worth it. If this is something you're interested in doing, if you see other creators doing it on Instagram and you're like, that looks like so much fun, invest the time, invest the energy. It is so worth it both financially and from like a creative fulfillment perspective. The last thing I'll say before we get into this episode is therapists, you should not do brand deals underneath your private practice, right? Obviously, there's lots of ethical concerns with that. As therapists, we cannot sell things to our clients. That creates a dual relationship. So please make sure to take care of yourself as you are doing this, right? You can either do it as an individual, right? Separate from your private practice as a 1099 as you're working with brands, or you can incorporate a separate business is what I've gone ahead and done. So I have a different business outside of my therapy practice where I do my brand partnerships, right? Talk to an accountant, talk to an attorney, but definitely make sure that you have separation and division here from your therapy work and your brand partnerships. Okay, let's get into today's episode. Hi, Lissette. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about who you are, how you kind of got into this influencer space, just a little bit of your story?
Yeah, so my name is Lissette, and I'm the founder of Influence with Impact. And it's a creator first agency. I know you've had experiences working with us where we do everything from working with the new emerging creator to the more experienced creator to help them thrive in the creator economy as a career, as a business. And all that to say, my experiences are on working both brand side and creator side in the influencer marketing space. So I actually the first ever creator I paid was in 2012, and it was the blogger era. Yeah. So it's funny because blogs to me are not dead, but people think they're dead. And I'm like, but they were the OGs. So that's kind of as far back as I went. And then obviously as the digital space progressed, those things changed. But starting my experiences there, and I remember paying the blogger in 2012, I was like, I like writing. I have a journalism background. Why am I not starting a blog? So that's
Mhm.
literally how I started my creator career was, wait, I want to get paid too, which is the irony. I didn't get paid until like 4 years after I started my blog,
Yeah.
which I'm sure we'll dive into. But, the personal brand is so important. And I actually didn't have one developed until much later. But those two experiences really helped me see the perspective of what do brands really want when they're working with creators? What do creators really need to build a personal brand that's monetizable? And of course, working with brands is kind of the first way in, but we help with, launching different programs and services as well, stemming from content creation. So if
Mhm.
you can sell it with content, we probably can support you.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's so cool because for therapists, content tends to be the afterthought, right?
Right.
So usually therapists want to start their private practice, they want to get, therapy clients, maybe
Yep.
they decide to do Instagram, and then
Yep.
once their caseload is full and they're growing thousands and thousands of followers, they're like, "Hey, wait a minute, I could probably do something else here too."
Yep.
So it's interesting that, you kind of took a different approach of like
Yeah.
content was that first primary goal of like,
Yep.
let me do the influencer thing, let me get paid in this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to sort of have to be patient in that process?
What's interesting is that I had the other career, right? So I think about your therapist clientele, they have clients. So they're like,
Yeah.
I don't have to do this. It's a nice to have. And so many things happen from that. I think we don't see our value, we don't see our worth. For so long, I was writing blog posts and I had a little bit of a stint actually freelance writing for a media publication just on samples, just on product, right? I would
Mhm.
never do that today. But at the time, I was like, well, like, I don't know if I can get paid, right? So you kind of
Yeah.
start to second guess yourself and limit all these beliefs because, well, I have air quotes a traditional job, right? So that was
Mhm.
kind of how it was for me. And when I finally got paid, it actually wasn't because I said, you know what, it's time. It's because someone said, I want to pay you.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people run into that, especially in the creator space, where it's like, oh, whoa, I started this as a hobby or I started this as a side project and someone wants to pay me. And that was kind of my journey in. But the reason they wanted to pay me is because at that moment, I had established myself as a brand. The blog wasn't random anymore. I remember when I first started my blog, it was literally like Lissette's diary. What I was
Uh-huh.
wearing, what I was doing. I was living in New York City at the time. I was like, this was a cool thing I went to. And it wasn't really wrapped around a mission or wrapped around a brand. Over the years, I started to do that for myself. And it was really because, again, working brand side, I was doing a lot of campaigns where we had to do this for a brand. We had to go in and
Yeah.
say, this is the story. This is how we're going to market it. This is what we're going to do. And I said, what's my story? What really ties everything I'm doing together? And that actually became Marketable Millennial, which was my first actual official blog name because
Uh-huh.
otherwise it was literally Lissette's blog. And someone reached out to me and was like, I love what you're doing. I want to pay you for this campaign. It was actually with Google, the Google devices, and they
Mhm.
really just want to talk about creating a smarter home. Great, kind of matched into what I was doing. First time I actually got paid, and I got paid like $50. So after that, I was like, hold on a minute. Like, you're paying these creators thousands of dollars and you
Yeah.
have a substantial following too. So that kind of shifted the narrative, but it really wasn't until someone took a chance on me that I started to look at myself and say, holy cow, like, yeah, you can do this. You started this because you said I can do that. And here you are.
I think it's so interesting too of you must have had such a unique perspective coming from brand side and really knowing rates, because oftentimes I'll hear from therapists when they get their first brand deal or two and it's $50 or
Yeah.
$200. People are like elated that somebody's
Yeah.
going to pay them that much money to make a reel that they've been making for free for years now. uh,
Yep.
but then on the flip side you're like, no, I see how much people are actually getting paid. I know that it can be a heck of a lot more than that.
Oh, yeah. And I would say as the industry started to grow, rates were pretty low in the beginning. I think before we realized, the value of influencer marketing. And I will never forget there was this one moment where there was a creator that I was hiring. I'd already worked with them before. And when they quoted me a rate, it was a higher rate. I have, by the way, never judged someone for having even the highest rates that you're like, why would someone send me that? I actually
Yep.
usually look at it from a, wow, good for you. Someone's saying yes. So awesome.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, they actually sent me their rate. It was almost double. And I had the budget for it. So I was like, oh, awesome. Yeah, I can pay that. And then after the fact, we were talking about it as a team and we're like, that person was just waiting for someone to actually say no. Like they gave themselves a raise. They were
Yeah.
like, well, someone said yes, so I go a little higher. I'm going to go a little higher and see. And my new rate is when someone says no. And I kind of adopted that because, to your point, I saw how much people were getting paid. But as someone who was still not actually super comfortable, this is 2017, super comfortable advocating for themselves, I would just kind of do almost like the rate creep, where I was like,
Mhm.
let's see, when someone says no, it's over for me. And that wasn't the best strategy, but it got me through. And I think eventually, learned how to better actually advocate for myself. But it's funny when you really, the hardest person to do work on is yourself. And I think
For sure.
this, obviously, what you're doing. But yeah, it's kind of nice when someone else can do it for me, because they'll probably give an extra push that I'm limiting myself on.
Yep. Tell me how your niche has changed over the years. I definitely did not follow you in the marketable millennial stage. So talk to us through like where that kind of started
Yeah.
to where you're at now.
It's so funny because when I started that, and there's this like website archive thing that exists on the internet, and you basically can see what a website looked like before. So I've gone
Oh,
in and
that's
seen,
cool.
yeah, like what I said. And essentially the point of Marketable Millennial is I had always really talked about my career. So I talked about me working in influencer marketing, how someone could work in influencer marketing, how to build a career in this. I was also doing on-air lifestyle segments at my local
Mhm.
news station. So talking about all that just from a professional lens. And what I noticed was that, again, in my story, that's where you really start. Marketing yourself and putting yourself out there was really, really hard for millennials, or at least my communities. And what I wanted to do with that was really create a way for just millennials to know how to advocate for themselves, put themselves out there. Then, as that evolved, it actually took a little bit of a turn, because what I realized is once I started working with one brand, a lot of brands started kind of knocking on my door that were
Mhm.
more lifestyle. So I really was working, travel was a big niche for me because I was traveling a lot for work. I also was posting a lot of fashion content, a lot of the creative, pre-reels days where you had these like really produced creative photos. And oftentimes people would just hire me because they thought the photos were cool and they wanted
Yep.
their random brand to have cool photos. So I think for a while, it's almost like I got lost again. I was making great money as a creator, but I didn't feel connected to my mission. I felt like it
Mhm.
was random. So in 2018, I was really still in that kind of random phase. I would say, again, I was making the most money, but I wasn't happy with what I was putting out there. And then I kind of went back to the drawing board and I said, Marketable Millennial as a mission is still really important to me. I want people to learn how to build their own personal brand, how to advocate for themselves, how to show up online. But I work with creators every single day. Why am I
Mhm.
not talking to creators? And what's interesting is toward the end of 2018, I got my coaching certification, which no one needs these days. But I thought at the time, I was like, this is how you coach people.
Yeah.
And what I focused on was career and business coaching. And I remember I put out that blog post is still probably live, where it's like, career pivot. I'm, going to start coaching people in the career space. And it wasn't really hitting. And I think it's because, again, I wasn't necessarily doubling down on career. I was actually doubling down on creators and the
Yep.
creator economy. So that's what caused the biggest pivot, which was more so, it wasn't a hard pivot. People followed me for career advice, but I needed now to attract the creator career. And that's where things started to shift. I would say 2019, if you, go back and look at my content, if you look at my blog posts, because again, I was still blogging pretty hard, the things I'm talking about are your traditional how to build a media kit, how to talk to brands, how to negotiate, how
Mhm.
to calculate a rate. We've had rate guides for a really long time. And then over the years, I think where we are now is almost a blend. And funny enough, at the time that you all are listening to this, I committed to rejiggering my brand. And it's because of becoming a mom, really. And where we're at now is more of the entrepreneur's story. So building a career as a creator is still one very important pillar because it's how people
Mhm.
find me. It's what's really exciting for me. And obviously, it's what drives my business forward. But the storytelling part is more so the entrepreneur journey, becoming a new parent, becoming a new homeowner. And
Yeah.
it's this idea of newness. And something I've been saying in my bio is, being a beginner at things. And
Yeah.
so many people I think can relate to that. That's just a chapter in life I'm in now. But over the years, as you can kind of see, it's been almost like snaking my way through my brand. It's like, ooh, this feels good. Let me go a little bit to the right. Let me go a little to the left, just in terms of finally aligning. And what's funny is, I don't think this is the end. I think 5 years from now, I'm probably going to evolve again.
Yeah.
And that's totally normal. Your audiences grow with you. People come and go. People, maybe aren't interested with what you're doing today, but you're going to find new followers tomorrow that are. So that's kind of been the journey.
And, I've probably followed you since maybe 2020 or 2021 when I first
Yeah.
started on Instagram. And it's been cool to see you from the outside kind of going through that journey because none of it has felt like a really big pivot.
Right.
Even, Lisette did not share her pregnancy on Instagram. So it was like normal content one day and then just like I had a baby the next. There was not like this sort of lead up into it.
Nope.
But even that, you still framed everything through your life. And so
Right.
I think that all of it just really made sense that you would be sharing it, right? And so it's felt
Yeah.
really cohesive as somebody in your audience, which I think is so cool too, to sort of
Thank
be able
you.
to like show those different passions and those different sides of you.
And it's so fascinating because I remember when I hard launched my child, which will make for a great story when she's older. I was going on maternity leave. I really did take a very intentional maternity leave, disappeared out of my business for about 2 months. And my goal with social media, because, content creators, you're always on. It
Yep.
was what I call just shit posts, just literally post what feels good at the time, at the moment. And obviously I was postpartum on maternity leave. So most of it was me, my experiences as a mother. And what I noticed, I was doing a lot of polls on my Instagram
Mm-hmm.
stories. Instagram is my main platform. And I asked people, are you a parent? If you're not a parent, do you find this content interesting or are you tuning out? And I got such an overwhelming amount of people saying, I just think it's interesting.
Yep.
And I got DMs from people who were like, I've committed to being child free, but it's just interesting to watch you grow into this, to see the new challenges that you're kind of going through. So that's where, again, I was kind of reverting back to this idea of, oh my gosh, yeah, it's about being a beginner. So many people relate to that. I posted something yesterday about being a work from home mom, which means I'm literally working at the same time I'm taking care of my child. Husband is doing the same thing. We're kind of splitting our day with who has less meetings and can do parent duty. And it
Yep.
was kind of this post that was a little chaotic on, this is my life now, like I got to find a way to balance everything. But I got comments from people who were also like, not even a mom, but I find this so interesting and I relate, right? I feel
Yep.
seen. I feel like I'm constantly balancing life in general. So I think it's just a testament to when you make a slower pivot, again, you will lose people. There will be people who maybe are triggered by just seeing you become a parent, but you're not 100% going to lose everyone. And I think a lot of creators, a lot of business owners are afraid of doing that because they think their business is going to take a hit. But no, you're
Yep.
actually finding new people at the same time that your current people are being seen and celebrating with you.
And getting to know you on like such a deeper level too, which is
Yeah.
really cool.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me, where did the idea for influence for impact with
With
impact? Okay,
impact.
yes.
Yeah.
Where did the idea for influence with impact come from, and how did that kind of start, and where is it at today?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said it differently because there's a funny story about that. I first started the business Influence to Impact. And the reason for that was when I quit my corporate job, I knew that I had enough network to have creator clients and to actually have brand clients. So I was still
Mm-hmm.
doing both. I was consulting for brands, executing their influencer campaigns. And then with creators, I was already coaching them, I was already building courses and programs for them. So the main signature program I worked to build in 2020, which is funny, I started building this right before the pandemic was official. Do you know what I
Yep.
mean? Like it was literally end of February where I was like, I have my plan and here we go. The
Yep.
pandemic really took a very serious turn in March, April, May, June, July. And what I wanted to do was really create this program that was our mastermind as we know it today that would essentially help creators let go of the stigma of I'm just an influencer and believe that they're making impact in their communities. So
Mhm.
it was really about for you to make impact, you have to be super clear on how you're showing up. It can't be random because if it is random, it actually leans more toward this show and tell energy
Yeah.
versus you literally establishing yourself as a brand, building community around something, getting people excited and connected to you around something. And the point of doing all that was A, to build more impactful careers, but also to build a career because I
Yeah.
truly do believe brands hire people who have a story. You've seen that, right? It's like,
For
yes,
sure.
you're a therapist, but you're not just a therapist. Like you have a
Mhm.
business. So you get to work with brands who see you as a business owner. You've worked with lifestyle brands who just feel themselves fitting in to what you're doing every day as a business owner, as a person existing, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the goal. So it was influence to impact. And then very early on, so hot tip for business owners, I was like, I'm going to trademark the name because it takes like years sometimes for
Yeah.
the trademark to actually go through. And there was someone else with influence to impact, the number two. And when I was going in, it got rejected. So
Oh,
I
no.
actually ended up having to midway, and I'm talking like a year and a half deep, change everything to influence with impact, new website, new branding. It was a whole thing. And what's funny is the person who owned the trademark that was really close to mine, they were so loving and nice, and something you could work on with a lawyer is get a letter from them that essentially says like, it's fine, I allow you to have this, I know it's close to mine, but it's fine. And what was interesting is the actual trademark office said no, like it's way too close, it's a number
Yeah.
two or the word two. So anyway, that's kind of where we went. But I actually feel like that fits a lot better because the mission around it of having influence but also having intentional influence was very, very important.
Yeah. I imagine that that's something a lot of therapists can relate to also,
Yeah.
right? Since again, that primary goal is not probably being an influencer, but
Yeah.
really wanting to like help their community. So, what advice do you have for therapists who are maybe like newer to Instagram, but they know
Okay.
that eventually they want to go beyond just filling their caseload and they do
Yeah.
want to get to that point of pursuing brand deals? Where should they sort of start or like keep in mind even in their early content creation days?
Yeah. And it's funny because again, I'm in this like feeling like I'm starting over phase. But I would say you actually should start with experimenting
Hmm.
because what I think gets people stuck the most is perfection. They want the brand, they want the cohesiveness, they want their videos to look a certain way. They want to learn, how do I make this cool transition or participate in trends? And the only way you learn all that and figure that out and kind of move yourself forward is experimenting.
Yeah.
Try a vlog. Tell us a day in your life as a therapist. Try a client story in a conversational way, speaking to camera. Just literally play an experiment. Once you do that enough, you'll have data. You'll have, ooh, what's resonating most? What's driving
Hmm.
results? What are the videos that are, getting the most reach and bringing people to my page? You'll also know what videos are more exciting and fun for me to create, which
Yeah.
is a balance because I think a lot of people are like, well, this performed well, must do that forever. And then you kind of don't love that forever. That's okay. You can always go back and experiment. But having a little bit of that balance is going to be very important. And then after that, I would get more serious. That's when I'd go in and be like, we're tightening up this brand, right?
Yeah.
And the one other tip I'd give, because I think as business owners and even following you, you're going to get a lot of this advice. Something to really think about is your story and coming and showing up as a person, which is
Hmm.
something that I find a lot of business owners, be it in therapy or not, struggle with as well. Because they're like, okay, I've gotten to the point where now I'm polished up a little,
Yeah.
but I need you to bring back the person. I need you to, make some videos that feel quirky and funny if that's you. Make some videos that feel warm and vulnerable and cozy if that's you.
Yeah.
And it's really back to people hire people they like, and you know this. So it's really bring that back, bring those stories back. It's not cringy. It's putting yourself out there and helping other people feel seen so that they work with you.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've realized can be so helpful is that it can really just be like the little details of your day that help people connect.
Yeah.
As therapists, I think that we were taught in grad school, like you have to be a blank slate. And I have so
Yeah.
many thoughts on that for another day. But, we don't need to go and share everything about our relationships or,
Right.
all the childhood trauma we had or whatever in order to open up and be a human on the
Yeah.
internet.
I
Right. But
agree.
sharing what kind of coffee you like to drink or what
Yeah.
you're excited about wearing this weekend can also be like your personality shining
Yeah.
through, right? And that's not embarrassing or weird or like too much
No.
self-disclosure for a
Yeah.
therapist.
Privacy is still super valuable, and always honor that and keep that, and find a way, again, just share your personality, share your
Yeah.
day. It's funny, some of my most popular stories content, which is a great avenue if you have Instagram to just play and have fun and show your personality, is like me making matcha. It's
Yeah.
like my dog and his story of his fur changing color. It is just so random and funny. And another just example, my own therapist, I hired her because I saw her showing up as a new mom. I saw her talking about postpartum, which for me was what I was really going into and dealing with. I hired
Mm-hmm.
her prenatal, so before giving birth, but it was because of her story as a mom. And it was her warm and gentle nature that I noticed when she showed up, which is something I personally wanted. And
Yeah.
there's a therapist, there's a personality for everyone. I've previously worked with a therapist who was like, tell it like it is. You've got this, and that. And she kind of challenged me a lot, which I needed, I think, when I was in my 20s, but
Yeah.
not when I'm in my 30s as a mom. I'm like, I just need slow, chill, gentle vibes. And social media did that for me.
Yeah. Is there a certain number of followers that you think it makes sense to like start actually considering brand deals or?
Today, I would say not really because of the rise of UGC. So, the rise
Mm-hmm.
of user generated content where you can essentially make content for brands, then they're going to use that on their socials. And that is a more than ever situation. Working on the brand side, we never really did that. You usually had a social media team for that brand. You work with them to incorporate what you're doing in the influencer marketing space, but they've got a plan. They're doing everything, very polished, very produced. But then what we notice, I think, is people, again, buy from people they like, buy from brands
Yeah.
that feel like their friend, that feels a little more, not just casual, but realistic versus this perfectly polished product photo. So then they started to use more influencers because they realized influencers are really good at adding that personal lifestyle story to any brand. Today, because it's almost like they dip their feet in influencer, they're like, oh no, like real people, real consumer stories are what's going to sell our product.
Yeah.
And a really good example, there's this really beautiful fridge. It's like a retro looking drink fridge. I'm forgetting the name, but if you're listening and want to go find it, sorry for your spending. And I kept seeing an ad for it, but all the ads were always people setting it up. It's like, refill my drink cart with me.
Yeah.
And that is when I started to really click and be like, oh my God, I think I want this. If it was just like really beautiful, and it's a beautiful product, but it was just like really beautiful produced ads and photos, I'd be like, eh. So anyway, back to that, I think if you can produce content really well, and this does not mean only like professional video camera, it means
Yeah.
really great storytelling, really great just flow and engaging videos. You could work with a brand at any level. It's less so about the follower count, but I will say the amount of content you put out there does matter. So I've
Mm-hmm.
always said, like, around the 6 month mark of showing up consistently, right? So, not, I've been posting once a week to really figure out social media. You probably need a little longer to really bulk up that portfolio. That's
Yeah.
the best time for you to go and reach out to a brand. And if you are a smaller creator, the best thing you could do is go around pitching yourself. People have opinions on pitching, and I still believe it works well. People get to
Yeah.
know you, they get to see who you are. And if you're a newer creator, just be upfront about the different services you provide. So you can say, I'd love to hear how you work with influencers. Some of my favorite ways are making video content for you that you could use on your pages. Maybe it is hosting workshops that are sponsored because that's what converts really well for you. So you're going to have to get a little more creative because what you don't have air quotes, is the big mass reach, which for some brands is
Yep.
nice and lovely and beautiful. They want to work with people with hundreds of thousands of followers. If you don't have that, that's fine. You have other skill sets and other avenues to provide value. So it's going to be a little bit more of a conversation for you where you ask, what are you doing right now? And share creative ways of, if it were me, I'd do this, this, and that.
I love that too, because I think that it really makes it clear that you need to find what your strengths are as a creator and bring them to the table.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you have a few hundred followers and all that you're posting on Instagram is like sort of B rolls with some generic text on top, it's going to be really, really hard to
Yeah.
grow your community and to get brand deals and people to pay you for content. Right.
Yeah.
And so you sort of have these options of like, I'm going to show up really fully. I'm going to show up really authentically. I'm going to make, videos that feel really different than other people's. I'm going to make videos that like are really colorful and vibrant and like attractive in that way. Or I'm going to grow a big following and have, a lot of trust with my community. But that we do need to, if we want part of our career to be influencing, right, and like content creation, we're going to need to put some effort into becoming pretty good at it, in whatever way that looks like for you.
Yeah. And that's just reality. It's funny because there's, I think, a lot of talk on the internet about just posts. And again, I said experimenting is great, but you've got to refine it later. The
Yeah.
experimenting is to get you moving, is to get you, out of your comfort zone and to just start before you're ready. But eventually you do have to polish it a little bit, and not in a way that feels curated and inauthentic, but in a way that says, I take myself seriously and I am here to use content as a means for also monetizing.
Yep. How do you suggest that therapists find brands that they can pitch for potential partnerships?
I think definitely first shop your day, right? So wake up and say, what do I do? For me, I wake up and I have a routine where I actually, again, as a new mom, dad takes morning routine. He takes her away from me. He, feeds her, and while he's doing all of that, I'm really taking care of myself. I'm catching up on emails if that's, taking up brain space. I'm making my matcha. I'm making my fun breakfast. Okay, all those things in and of itself, there are so many brands in my first 2 hours of my day. I am using my phone and Google apps to catch up. I can go reach out to Google and talk about my morning routine. I have skincare that I love doing. I've actually worked with a skincare brand before from this lens of, you're a busy entrepreneur, only have limited time to do your skincare routine. What are you using? What's a catch-all product? So shopping your day, obviously as a business owner, there are tools in your business that you use. Maybe it's Adobe tools. Maybe it is some of your project management tools like Asana, whatever, Notion. Those are brands that you could reach out to. Then comes the evening. What does your evening look like? Or what do your days off look like? What do your hobbies and interests look like? And I think, again, if you're doing a really good job of promoting your business at the same time as incorporating that personal life, right? So I'm not saying, again, spaghetti at the wall is your polished brand. It is, I want people to get to know me as a person as well. So if you can incorporate those little pieces, it's going to be a lot easier for you to find brands to work with. And one thing I'll also add to this, you can't have shown this to us once and expect a brand to want to work with you. A really good example is when I became a mom. Because I hard launched my pregnancy, I didn't have the pregnancy journey to show the brand, oh, people care about this. So it actually took me about 3 to like 5 months for me to get my first brand to even want to talk to me about, like working with me as a new mom and that campaign, which was really, really fun. But what that lead up was, because I had content that would prove that I could do that. So just a nod before you reach out to brands that aren't your air quotes obvious, because you talk about your business every day. So I'm sure that's covered. Make sure you do a little bit of content to show us that. And then I think finally, like, look at your network. I think that's the easiest way to also just look at what your peers are doing. Obviously, at that point when you're reaching out, it's not, I want to work with you. They're done. They've already picked their creators and the content is live. But you can go back and say, I love what you did with this. If there's ever an opportunity to revisit this or do it in a different way, I'd really love to participate. So looking at your network, shopping your whole day, shopping your medicine cabinet, your desk, all the things.
Yeah. I think the network piece is like so huge too. One of my favorite ways to find brands to pitch is I always DM my personal account any paid
Yeah.
partnerships that I enjoy watching.
Yeah.
And then I always check too, like, is this somebody who has like a similar size following to me, or is it,
Right.
someone with a zillion followers?
Yeah.
Or, are they like a helping professional? Are they a therapist,
Yeah.
nutritionist, like that kind of thing? Is that important to the brand?
Yeah.
Are they a business owner, like another
Right.
entrepreneur? And so I think that that can be so helpful because
Yeah.
the brands vary quite a bit on who has budget and who doesn't. And
Right.
it's not always, the big brands have the best budgets and the small brands have the worst budgets. And so
Yeah.
seeing other people doing like paid partnerships and
Right.
investing in influencer marketing, I think is just huge too.
Yeah. And I think over time, you probably get to know your network and you know the people who are really serious. For example, I think a lot of therapists look to you and say, if she's working with them, they probably had a reasonable budget because I
Yeah.
know she doesn't undervalue herself. They probably, allowed creative freedom because I know her content is very authentic. So they're not just going to spoon feed you messaging. So I think
Yeah.
looking at what people are doing in your network is such a good idea.
How do you know what to charge when you're approaching a brand?
Yeah, everyone's favorite question. So I'll start by saying every number needs to be followed by data and by validation. It's the hardest thing for people to do because you're like, I have to brag about myself right now. And also, yes, it kind of sucks that we have to prove our value to people. But again, I'm talking people who aren't hundreds of thousands of followers lifestyle account. They're getting brands in their inbox all the time. And I'm not saying
Yeah.
you have to be that to be successful. I'm saying their way of working with brands is a little different. So for
Yeah.
you kind of have to probably go in and introduce yourself a little, get more creative. So what I like to start with, if it is a campaign that requires you to post on your platform, your follower count, your engagement does carry some inherent value. And oftentimes we'll use the percentage method. So about 1 to even now these days 7% of your following is the starting point. So
Mhm.
very important to say starting, because especially if you are newer and you have 1,000 followers, please do not charge $10. Please do
Yeah.
not charge $70. But that's a good place to start. I think if you have a bigger following, bigger engagement, awesome. Kind of put yourself on that sliding scale of what
Yeah.
feels right for you. So starting there, the second thing is look at the like what I call the term and contract terms because they will show up anyway, no matter what. If you didn't ask the question, you're going to see it in the contract. So that means usage rights. That is, I think, one of the hardest things to really wrap your mind around for people who aren't in marketing. But the easiest way for me to explain it is if you posted a post today, it has like a 72-hour shelf life. If
Yeah.
they're boosting your content for 6 months, meaning they're putting paid ads behind it, they are making this seen by more people, it's actually not exposure. It is, I am now associated with this brand for
Yeah.
6 months, right? So, what might happen there is you become more of a face for them. They're using your name, your likeness. If a competitor brand, right, let's say you work with Adobe, Canva's not reaching out to you, right? Because
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I see that they're doing this. So you're also putting yourself to potentially, less campaigns in that category if people see that brand as a competitor. So that's what you really want to think about with usage. I can give you percentages. I could say charge 20, charge 30% of your rate if you really need the math, but just think about the situation you're in, and
Yeah.
that should help you figure out a number that feels more realistic. The next big popular term is exclusivity. And very simply, that means you cannot work with their competitors. So, same scenario, kind of, where you
Mhm.
want to maybe give yourself a little bit of a rate that says, how much business am I kind of generating every month in this category? I might charge that for every month that they need. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
There's also always going to be things like, rush fees. And that's so, again, subjective to you. If you're like, I can put something out in a few days, like I'm a pretty quick creator. If you say, I need 2 to 3 weeks because my client roster is so heavy that I can't just stop what I'm doing to make content, charge more for that.
Yeah.
And then finally, once we get through all those terms, right, and you'll learn other stuff that kind of pops up in contracts and things. So I won't dive too deeply to confuse people on that. You really have to think of labor. So one thing I really challenge people is, okay, so we know that this is supposed to be posted on my pages. I've kind of covered my value in terms of engagement and follower size, but now I need to talk labor. And I think this is where smaller creators or maybe business owners who didn't come out saying, I'm going to build a 200,000 following account,
Yeah.
that's where you have to really pay attention, because that's where I need you to think about how long will this campaign realistically take for you, and are you charging for the labor? And I think what's nice about business owners is most of you probably have hourly rates. Most of you understand how
Yeah.
much you're going to get paid by client work, and the before, middle, and after, right? When you're doing reports, you know what you would charge for that. So yeah, charge that, as a starting point. You can definitely add in those amounts. I have a client, for example, who's a nutritionist, so, kind of service-based job. And similarly, something I told her was, what amount of clients are you missing out on this day because of having to go do this work, do this
Yeah.
gig that they were trying to hire her for? And she was like, I don't know, maybe like $200 an hour. Great. How long will that take you? I don't know, maybe like 5 hours. Okay, great. So $1,000 is actually what I need to make sure you're getting paid, even if your air quotes follower count isn't where you feel like you're deserving of charging $1,000. Your
Yeah.
labor is deserving. So again, when you go back and talk to the brand, it's just something you're going to have to add on. For me to take this on, I will have to reduce my client workload, so my fee incorporates that piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I think holistically, that's a really good place to start. If you're someone who also has a lot of press, you have a book, a lot of authority, add a tax for that. Like,
Yeah.
really bump up your rate. But that's where I'd go.
Coming from the brand side, do you view creators as difficult when they try and negotiate or push back on rates?
Not always, unless they're just literally sending a number. And I'm like, what does this number mean? Because again, I probably have to go back to, if it's higher than what my budget is, and I'd love to actually talk about budget for a second, but if it's higher than what it is, I have to go back to my higher ups and say, we need more money. And I think it's worth it because. So
Yeah.
really trying to validate it for that creator. But if they are just sending a number, it's probably not a great look. The other thing that is such a pain, and every marketer has talked about this, is rate sheets. They
Mm-hmm.
actually don't work in your favor. I think it's great if you want to just have it for yourself and easier for you to kind of know what to charge. But if you just send me a rate sheet and I have to do all this math, it doesn't make sense, because no campaign is cookie cutter. Like, it is one post and that's it. There's other things going
Yeah.
on. So I'd rather you just tell me your rate. Otherwise, I do find that a lot of people think it's difficult if you're just like spewing something out. And the other thing I've seen before actually is, really, if you choose to have management, make sure you pick people who are good, personable people who care, because I have seen, like, sent from my iPhone, her rate is, and it's like $50,000. And I'm like, for me to pay $50,000, I better not get a sent from iPhone cold, dry email. We better build a relationship that feels
Yeah.
good and exciting. So definitely those pieces. And what I wanted to add about budget is, a lot of people will give you the advice of, ask what's their budget. And that, for sure, that should be a really great question to ask off bat, so you kind of know where you can be at. But not every brand is going to be able to tell you, this is what I have for you. In
Yeah.
my experience working brand side, because I was part of advertising agencies, we're just given like a lump sum. Here's $100,000. I want to see 15 influencers get hired around this follower range. Go reach out to people. And what we're doing is playing what I call budget Tetris.
Yeah.
And we're getting people's rates and trying to fit things in. So I can't really tell you what I have per person. I might at most respond and say it's pretty healthy, but I need to hear people's rates before I give you a number.
Yeah.
So just a piece. We're not gatekeeping.
Yeah. I think too, like, I've seen so many brands come to my inbox and they start off gifted, and then
Yeah.
like you push back and you ask, do you have a budget for this campaign? And they're like, yes, send over rates. And so I
Yeah.
think that as like a bare minimum starting point, every
Yeah.
therapist should push back on that. Just
Yeah.
because the first offer is not paid or very low does not mean that there is not a budget, right?
Mhm.
But those marketers are also doing their job of playing marketing Tetris. And if they can get you to say yes for $0, that's lovely for them.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and so I think that oftentimes therapists kind of rule things out too early, assuming that that means it's a no.
Yeah, exactly. I've also seen creators just kind of ignore certain emails because they think it's spam, but it probably is an opportunity. It might not be the best opportunity, but it's something worth paying attention to. And I also do believe when you're newer to working with brands, there is value in starting off almost like an internship phase where not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily working for free, but it's okay to offer a discounted rate if it helps you have something on your portfolio.
Yeah.
Always tell them this though, because otherwise you're screwing over your peers and yourself if they come back and say, but you did it for free. So tell them, hey, I'm really building up my portfolio of working with brands in this space. So I'm willing to meet you at this discounted rate just this one time. And please know this doesn't reflect the value of other people in my follower size. So just kind of
Yeah.
giving them that qualifier is pretty nice. I recently started a YouTube, and there have been some brands looking for YouTube creators or asking for my rates on YouTube. And I've just said, hey, actually, I'd be willing to repost this as a short. I'm willing to kind of, do this for a very minimal rate, just covering the cost of my editing labor so
Yeah.
that I get more experience adding YouTube ads. So again, work with what you feel is right for your business, but always validate it.
Yeah. How do brands sort of evaluate the success of a campaign after it's done?
Yeah. Every brand will have a different goal. So really depends on the goal. And that's also a really good question to ask in that first email where you're asking for budget. It's nice to say, what are some of your goals and what budget do you have? Because that makes it easier for you. And it's literally the language I use is it makes it easier for me to come up with a rate or a proposal that will actually serve you and value you. So that also helps a little bit in negotiation, but it's really across the board. I would say a majority of brands or more established brands are actually looking for brand awareness, which means more people aware. So they'll look
Mhm.
at things like reach and views and not necessarily looking at it and saying, like, we're not going to pay you because it wasn't good enough. It was,
Yeah.
was this something that really drove value for the people we need? There's, for example, a brand that I work with in the business space, and they hired me and they paid me really, really well. And we could talk about kind of giving people in kind stuff if you're not happy with the results. But I knew that they were kind of looking for this more awareness piece, and specifically in the Denver city because it was a big market for them. And that's one of my top audiences. So when I finished, I think I got like, typically I might get 8 to 10,000 views. That was a horrible day and I got 2,000 views. And
Yeah.
I was like, they hate me, but it was such a targeted 2,000 views. And they saw, I actually got a lot of um, they gave me an affiliate link. So I got a lot of people using it. And it was because it was so targeted. So they were super happy, hired me again. So when I say brand awareness, it's not just high numbers, it's
Yeah.
relevant numbers. The other thing I see a lot of is nowadays conversion. That means something
Hmm.
different for everyone. It is how many people clicked on your link. How many comments are you getting of people saving this post to maybe shop later or to use this, service later? And just kind of the conversation being driven in the comments. There will always be, and I would say usually smaller brands because they're trying so hard to get like a 1-to-1 return on investment, who will say, what we pay you, we hope to make that money back. But always push back on that because you aren't a salesperson, first of all. The
Yeah.
other thing in marketing that we've always said, and feel free to use this, is it takes multiple times for a brand to be in your face before you actually consider buying it. We talk a lot about the marketing funnel. And the marketing funnel is like, yeah, people are aware. It takes a second to drive loyalty and to
Yes.
drive the sale. And unless you're posting 5 times about this brand in a very tight period of time, it's going to take a second for people to really convert. So pushing back on that. And then the second piece is the sales process is actually way more controlled by the brand. So the
Hmm.
brand, I've had this happen before. People will say, I really want to buy this, but the website is a little clunky, or I'm having trouble checking out with your code because they made a typo. And then they lose the sale because the person's like, never mind. It's too complicated. I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Or, the website has too many ads. Like you don't control what that final checkout experience is like, which is why I'm very uncomfortable with anyone who is looking for sales. So, really trying to validate, look, I have good saves, I have pretty good clicks that will show you people are interested in converting, but I really can't control that end checkout consumer process. So, no, I can't guarantee sales.
Awesome. I have a few questions for you from my audience on Instagram. So I thought we could do
Love it.
sort of like rapid fire with those.
Let's do it.
How do you balance making money from brand partnerships while also retaining the trust of your audience?
Yeah, it just has to be partners that authentically fit into your day, life, business. And that's why I think, working backwards, like I said, if you want to work with, Adobe, tell us about how you're making presentations. Tell us about your editing process for your content and how you use these tools. Because of that, it's going to help you in pitching the brand. And by no means am I saying make a bunch of free ads. I'm saying tell us a story
Yeah.
where that's just going to be incorporated in, and then when you're working with them, people are typically excited with you. So a big example was my baby carrier. So I love to baby wear. And I was showing, the one that I finally picked that I was so excited about when an ad finally came with them because I was an authentic user. Everyone was so excited. This is so fun. Oh my gosh, congratulations. So
Yeah.
it really does feel authentic if you are telling us your day to day. It is so obvious when it's something I'm like, I've never seen this before. Or you're talking about something that you've never done. Like if I went out and said, I am working with the, I'm going back to like mom space and think, okay, I breastfeed. If I go and start working with a formula brand tomorrow, people will be like, you've never talked about this before. Like,
Yeah.
what happened? Did I miss a chapter? And people will know I just did it for the money, right? So, really making sure that you are authentic in your storytelling so that the brands that you work with fit into it normally.
Yeah. Totally. How to bridge from companies just wanting free reels for gifted items to paid reels?
Oh, yeah. I think the labor piece is really actually valuable. We recently had a conversation on behalf of a client like this where they said, we will give you exposure. And I'm like, no, that doesn't work for us. And what I really went in and challenged them with was consider the labor, right? This person has a huge following and they have a huge following because they are really consistent and high produced in the way they make content. Again, not a fancy camera, just their storytelling. They go
Yeah.
out, they interview people, they like really make a big deal out of their posts. So they have an editor, they have someone who supports them with actually shooting the content. Those are people that they're looking to pay. So the creator is going to be out of money. I think a lot of business owners, you probably have a virtual assistant, you probably
Hmm.
have someone that supports you in some way in your business, because I know you're not full-time only making content. Use that and say, hey, at minimum, I need this amount of money. This at minimum is covering my team, my labor, and really making sure that that's a good place to start. And then,
Yeah.
of course, the second piece is, like you said, building a bridge is also about validating the value of your name, of your likeness, of your expertise. I will say if people are reaching out with gifted, they are one of those like, I'm trying to one this. If I'm spending this amount of money on you, I better make this amount of money back. So you're going to have to lead with that and say, the labor of me doing this, which may not directly correlate with results, but at the end of the day, I'm a small business owner too. So
Yeah.
I deserve, this minimum amount to kind of work together. And then what I find, let's say you only get that minimum labor piece, is if that goes well, they're going to pay you a fair rate next time. So I
Yeah.
think it's worth, going in and just asking, just trying to push, because next time it might look even better. And the last thing I'll kind of say on this is when it comes to gifted, if they're not budging, but it's a brand that you really value. I have something coming up of a mission based brand that I know is just so cool. They didn't have any budget. So what I said was, I can't guarantee you posts. I will post as I go, as I use this service. It's a service. And I'm doing it because I think it's a very important topic that not enough people are talking about. And I
Hmm.
say this to them and I say, this is why I'm doing this. And I also ask, I say, and also, can you please transparently confirm that no one else is being paid? It's really, important for my values to make sure I'm rightfully compensated. And if you're doing this gifted for everyone, I understand. But if you're not, please tell me. Like, we
Yeah.
will find out. So I said that to this last one, and they were like, thank you so much for saying that. I respect this so much. No, everyone's being gifted. They're doing it because they believe in the mission of this organization. The end.
Yeah.
So, really advocating, start with labor, go with your value, your name and likeness. And if you can't do it, just make sure it's something that either drives your business forward or they're able to give you, the flexibility of no guarantees. It's just going to be, if I like this, if it fits naturally, no timeline, can't tell you when it's going live.
Yep. Do you find that it's better for brands to approach you versus you pitching, like in terms of success rate or even like monetary rates?
It's honestly across the board. It really just depends on, because you might get brands reaching out to you that are just trying to like get the minimum amount of money for you. I recently
Yeah.
had an example like this. There's a product I use a lot and I was so excited they reach out. I was like, this is so cool. Like, I've been using this for a while. And they said, what are your rates? So I was like, oh my God, this is great. They're asking for my rates. They even led with no usage is required or exclusivity. So, and I was like, this sounds like a legit person.
Yeah.
And they literally, I quoted them 4,500 for one reel, which is something that I felt was valuable for just what this product is and something I
Yeah.
use often. And they came back and said, I'm sorry, I only have $450. And I was like, oh, but you reached out to me and
Yeah.
I'm a good fit. There was another brand that was like, you're the number one pick our client has. Can you come down? And I said, well, if I'm their number one pick, I hope that they're able to at least stretch, to 3K. There was another
Yeah.
situation like that. So it's interesting because it doesn't really matter who did it first. Of course, in terms of success rate, you're going to reach out to more people that are going to ghost you. That is
Yeah.
actually just a random reality. And being on the brand side, I know a lot of us are busy. We may save your name into something, but at the moment, I don't have anything going on. And I have so many emails from people pitching me that I can't respond to everyone. So that might happen. It's okay. Try to find another contact, follow up. And if it doesn't work out, just move on to the next brand that is authentic to you and fits into what you want to do.
Yep. Awesome. When does it make sense for influencers to consider signing with a talent agency like yours?
Yes, it definitely, I would say, depends on time. I don't actually recommend being with management if you are at zero because
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard for a manager to turn things 100% around for you. Being on both brand side and management, I used to go to brunch and breakfast with managers and they'd wine and dine me as a brand. And it really, at the end of the day, is my client has to have a relevant campaign for you. It really is not even up to me as the brand. So think about management. If you're at zero campaigns, they're going to be spending so much unpaid labor, right? And we all want to get paid fairly. It's a business.
Yeah.
Unpaid labor to put your name out there, to pitch for you, to introduce you to their network. And that's not going to convert for a while, or it may only convert when things are hyper relevant. One example I always think about is this one creator we work with. She has this dream brand, and we actually were able to start a conversation with them. But they said, actually, we're looking for a creator of this size and in this demographic. Do you have them? And we did have them, but it was awkward because we're like, I know it's your dream brand, but they're just telling us that they're not looking for this creator. They need this one.
Yeah.
So it really is just a very, it's not you, it's me situation.
For sure.
So with management, you've got to already have things going for everything to feel equitable and fair, but it's usually a time thing. Like I don't have time to be back and forth in my inbox right now. I don't have time to read my contracts, to invoice, to chase the invoice, to have these conversations right now, but it's not necessarily that you need it because you don't know what you're doing. I'd actually
Yeah.
suggest learn what you're doing, which I think you did such a good job at that. You know what you're doing. You were already pretty successful. And now it's, like giving my time back that should be earning me more money. Something that
Yeah.
we track as well, we've kind of started this year, is percentage increase, right? So, hey, if this brand reached out to me and my management was able to increase the rate by 40%, I'm net making more money because I know I'm
Yeah.
paying them 20, but I'm making more than what they reached out with. That's super valuable. So having someone to advocate for you and giving you your time back are, I think, the two reasons to want management. I've also had people who come to us who know what they're doing, but they get super nervous talking about money. And of course, that means they're not going to make as much money. So it's,
Yeah.
again, kind of with negotiation, but it's less that they want to do it. It just literally makes them anxious, anxiety, to have to talk about this. So really consider those reasons first.
Yeah, I think that was like the biggest selling point for me. So initially, I had like an assistant on my team that was
Right.
handling the administrative side of brand partnerships because, like you said, I did not have the time. But she was not like a very skilled negotiator. That was not her expertise. She had
Yeah.
not really worked in marketing before. And so, sort of shifting that responsibility from her to you guys has been huge. And that, like, I feel
Yeah.
like she was negotiating people down, and you guys are negotiating people
Yeah.
substantially higher. So that's been really, really cool to be able to say, like, I don't need to be the one doing this. I'm pretty confident talking about money. It's
Yeah.
my job as a business coach, but
Yeah.
I don't have the time to sort of sift
Yeah.
through all of the not so good offers to get to the few that do pay really well.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Lisette. Where can folks find you and follow along?
So, thank you for having me, by the way. This was such a
Yes.
fun conversation. And I love what you're doing because I feel like, I've said this to you before, but not enough people are talking about this, especially in your space.
Mhm.
Business owners, even the therapy space, I feel like they're much more afraid of putting themselves out there
Oh, yeah.
because people come to you because they're vulnerable. So
Yeah.
you're like, "Ooh, I don't want to sound like someone who doesn't know what they're doing either. Like I better be perfectly unanxious." So thank you for what you do. You can find me at Lissette Calv. That's my name. Sure, it'll be in the show notes
Yeah.
somewhere. And Influence with Impact is the business that I run. You can follow us there for creator tips and things and getting to know our clients and their success stories as well. And yeah, that's all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisette. I will talk to you soon.